The rest of the article continued with Woz being pretty down on computers and the computer market in general. I'm hypothesizing here, but I think his emotional state at the time was due to a few things. One, his fractured relationship with Steve Jobs, a friendship which started as an enabler to take Woz's engineering talents to the world. Two, his disillusionment at what had happened to his baby, Apple and the Apple II computer. The company had made some clear mistakes that had nothing to do with Woz. Had Woz designed the Apple III, or if he had been invited to Xerox to see the Alto, or if he had been head of the engineering, I dare say things would have been significantly different for Apple. In 1985, the Apple II line of computers still accounted for 85% of the company's revenue, but clearly lacked any product development. Steve Wozniak was a pioneer of 20th century integrated circuit design. He knew the best ways to get circuits to work in the most efficient ways. Back in the 70s, he had to do it all by hand, but these days we have people like today's sponsor, PCBWay, as your one-stop shop to help out with any electronics project. Heck, they even help out with CNC machining and 3D printing too. PCBWay can help with prototyping, and they can even assemble full PCBs for you. They even have a great community of makers on their shared projects website. So, if you want PCBs from just $5, then the way to go is PCBWay. Check them out today at PCBWay.com. Al's Geek Lab thanks PCBWay for their sponsorship. Now, let's get back to finding out about Steve Wozniak's PCBs. Third, and finally, Woz suffered a major accident in February of 1981. Michael S. Malone wrote a book called Infinite Loop: How the World's Most Insanely Great Computer Company Went Insane. A quote from the book characterized this time, quote, "Coming out of the semi-coma had been like flipping a reset switch in Woz's brain. It was as if his 30-year-old body had regained the mind he had at 18 before all the computer madness had begun. And when that happened, Woz found that he had little interest in engineering or design. Rather, in an odd sort of way, he wanted to start over fresh." End quote. Woz had been in a semi-coma following the accident, suffering head trauma which caused amnesia to the point where he couldn't even remember his name. Although Cloud9 was started almost 4 years after his injury, Woz's involvement at Apple faltered immediately following the accident and never fully returned. Despite all the naysaying, the interviewer in Computer Currents asked him if he was tired of computers. Woz replied saying that he was, but he still uses them every day. However, after a few musings, he pepped up a little and said that he also had a computer in the back of his own mind. However, Woz admits that this machine was just a hobby-level interest machine. Quote, "I have an ideal computer in mind. It would be what you might call a programmable machine, and it would be completely different in functionality from current computers. This machine wouldn't use variables, but it would have a very powerful programming language, so it would be able to function as a normal computer. This computer has already been announced. It has infrared input and output, and a 12-pin connector that connects to a 6502 equivalent CPU with 8K CMOS RAM. There's a mini jack on the side of the machine that will connect to any terminal and get the 6502 monitor up and running. You can even write your own test programs. It also has an LCD display, making it a perfect development system." End quote. This machine sounds a bit zany, to be honest with you. To a modern day 8-bit maker or retro hobbyist, it would be great fun to build something like this, no doubt. However, in 1985, the use of an 8-bit 6502 equivalent CPU, or maybe even a 16-bit equivalent such as the 65C816, would already be an aging machine. Powerful 16-bit computers were already well established in the market by then, with computers such as the Apple Macintosh, the IBM PC, especially with the 286 machines, and even the Sinclair QL. The new lines of 16/32-bit machines, including the Commodore Amiga 1000 and the Atari ST machines, were released in 1985, and the Intel 8386 32-bit machine being shipped later in that year would have known about the 16 and 32-bit onslaught well before 1985. Then the memory. An 8K CMOS RAM is far less memory than even the Apple II had in 1977. It takes it back to the Apple I sort of era. The above machine was an example of Woz doing what Woz loved best, building a tinkerer's machine for his own hobbies. It's clear to see that, left his own devices, Woz wouldn't be able to run his own business. He has admitted this many times over the years, and this was evidenced with Cloud9 in the end too. However, I started this article wondering what if Woz was left to his own devices, and I said, to an extent. The to an extent bit is important. The extent in 1976 was from Jobs, before his ego took hold. However, it is fair to say that Jobs' focus was on making a killer machine with the Apple II. Jobs saw the potential from the original Apple I computer. He saw how a bunch of integrated circuits on a board, a keyboard, and a TV screen could be something great. So Jobs' challenge was to make an insanely great machine, and the result was the Apple II. To say that the Apple II was the out-and-out winner of the original 1977 home computer trinity is pretty much clear for everyone to see. The other two machines, the Tandy Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1 and the Commodore PET, were decent enough machines, but Woz had built a computer that supported colour graphics and floppy disk machines in a neat little package. The PET and the TRS-80 were designed as text-only machines and had cassette tape drives. The Apple II looked the business too, with its quality moulded case and good-feeling keyboard. Jobs agonised over the aesthetics, but Woz got his way when it came to the hardware itself on the Apple II. The system board was a piece of beauty from an electrical engineering and user experience perspective. It had 8 expansion slots from the date of its immediate release. Many other computers of the time didn't have any expansion slots, simply opting for external connections, significantly limiting expansion opportunities. The foresight of Woz to create an open, expandable solution was pivotal. It opened up a massive ecosystem where Apple and any other vendors could make the Apple II do things that were never conceived of at the time of its creation. This factor alone was a major contributor to its 13-year lifespan. So, conceive if you will, that Jobs wasn't as ferocious and that Apple didn't quite become the juggernaut that it was. Imagine a future where Woz was the head of engineering at Apple, and under his direction, Apple made steady improvements to the Apple II line, up to and including the Apple IIe. Heck, maybe even the Apple IIc. Imagine if Steve Jobs had less influence on the hardware, staying as a marketing mogul with a keen eye on design principles, but never overshadowing the hardware design too much. Here's a rundown of what Apple standards could have been had Woz been led by someone who had honed his skills rather than effectively shut him down in a corner of Apple. Firstly, an open architecture which would remain the standard. Most of the Macintosh's life had been unfriendly to people that wanted to expand their computer. Even modern Macs make it very difficult to even upgrade the RAM and the disk capacity, let alone add in extra expansion cards to add functionality to the system. Under Woz's stewardship, I doubt that he would ever let that happen. I'd envisage that every machine would have had an open architecture, just like the Apple II had. Secondly, maker and hacker champions. Today we have a large maker community thanks to chips such as the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi, and the ESP32, but in 1976 the MOS 6502 CPU was the ultimate in low-price, hacker-friendly chips. Woz continued to support this hacker-friendly approach to this day. I dare say that he would have added continued ways to support the maker-hacker community directly through the hardware that Apple produce, even in 2026, rather than having to buy something else like an Arduino and use its Arduino language. All of the low-level access to the hardware and a suitable friendly programming language would be built into your Apple's PC to do what you needed without having to buy extra kit. When you switched on an Apple II back in 1977, you could access BASIC that talked to the hardware through peeks and pokes, or if that wasn't enough, you could use its built-in monitor or an assembler to write at the hardware level. I'd expect nothing less than something similar from Woz. Third, hardware standardization. Apple made lots of starts and stops regarding hardware choices over the years. Some were good, some were questionable, and some were downright stupid. Woz might have held on to 3.5-inch floppy disks for another year or two, but I'm sure he would have conceded they would have to go away eventually. On the other hand, I doubt that he would have introduced proprietary interfaces like Thunderbolt or Lightning, rather adopting for standards like USB around the time when the PC market did. For CPU choices, Apple started out life on the MOS 6502, then went to Motorola and IBM for the 68K and PowerPC CPUs respectively. All of these processors were effectively RISC architecture. In 2006, Apple famously switched to the Intel and x86-64 architecture. This went swapping out a reduced instruction set or RISC with a complex instruction set computing approach, CISC. Whilst this choice was appropriate at the time because IBM weren't able to cool or power the G5 CPUs efficiently enough in time for Apple, the choice backfired for Apple down the line, and Apple eventually did a handbrake back to RISC in the form of the ARM range of processors, branded by Apple as the Apple Silicon range of CPUs in 2020 with the M1. Had Woz been the person that was allowed to make the choice on CPU architecture, I'd put money that he would have stayed with RISC architecture at all times. His mantra of simplicity in electrical design aligns well with RISC. I dare say that he would have adopted the ARM architecture too, but possibly earlier than Apple did. Apple actually had an early foray with ARM architecture in 1990, licensing its use for the Newton PDA in 1993. It is conceivable that Woz may have chosen to fund ARM, and maybe he would have accelerated ARM CPUs into the Apple computer line rather than just mobile devices. Fourth, hardware and software compatibility. Apple's lines of computers have notoriously had poor backwards compatibility in them. Often, this is a choice by Apple of built-in obsolescence. Apple are making decisions for consumers about when to replace their perfectly good hardware. Woz doesn't agree with that principle, so it's possible you would see older hardware being supported for longer. Sure, you'd see the latest and greatest features in the newest hardware, but the software would have backwards compatibility. ProDOS on the Apple II range was an operating system that supported forwards compatibility and backwards at the same time, running on the Apple II GS as well as earlier Apple II machines. ProDOS volumes were also supported on Macintoshes for a while. I'd expect Woz to make cycle-accurate emulation technology in his systems so that users of new hardware could also use the old software too. The 2GS was a good example of this. I also wonder if, as microcomputing hardware power evolved, Woz could embrace open system software too. Imagine an early line of Apple computers running BSD Unix with a nice Apple design language desktop on top of it. I know that's what they pretty much did with NixStep, or to a lesser extent with AUX, but imagine an open source operating system for the masses. Linux might have never been made if that had happened. Microsoft wouldn't have won the desktop operating system war with Windows. So much would have been different in the computer landscape. Fifth, function over form. I don't think I could ever see a future where Woz would design a hockey puck mouse, or a mouse with a charging port on the underside for that matter, but it's fair to say that a lot of the aesthetics could and should have been left to people like Johnny Ive. I do see him weighing in on decisions like cooling though. The devices he would have made would have ran cooler or supported efficient cooling mechanisms so that fans weren't always blowing away. I'm looking at you, G4 and Intel Macs. Sixth, mobile technology. Woz is a fan of wearables and things mobile in general. If Woz had had a chance to continue to standardise Apple on RISC architecture, and particularly if he put Apple in the pathway of early adoption of ARM CPUs, then it is conceivable that the Apple Newton would have been a success. Rather than IBM's Simon being the first mobile phone come PDA, the Newton could have blazed that trail first. Maybe the iPhone could have come along far earlier than 2007. However, I dare say that knowing Woz, it would have sported a mini keyboard rather than a touch or stylus driven input.
Don't forget to come back next week for the next part of What If Woz Made Apple Computers. Or if it's already next week, the next part should be up here on your screens right now. If you've enjoyed this video series, then don't forget to like and subscribe to Al's Geek Lab.